Welcome to all of you out there in cyberspace as we continue our journey from the revolution to civil war. In 1 week or 1 month. But now we got 1 week to go from. No, that's right. We are revolution to the civil war in 1 week. We talked about all this yesterday.
Hey.
From the Federalists, we're going to turn things over to the Anti-Federalists today. If you're a Federalist, think about what that word means. It's kind of synonymous with national government. It means that you favor stronger control from the national government. We have a system called federalism in our republic, and at the beginning of the country, they had to figure out how much power does the Constitution give the central government, and if it doesn't give the central government that power, who has that power? Is it a state issue? These are things that were in our infancy here in the 1790s. It looks good on paper. This is the plan. How's it going to be carried out? So you've got Federalist and Anti-Federalism. Yesterday we focused on Washington and Adams and the Federalists. And today we're going to talk about how the Federalist influence started to decline in the mid-1790s, and then the Jeffersonians are going to take over. Those Anti-Federalists. Whoa, time out. Way too much power coming from Philadelphia at that time. Way too much power coming from the national representatives. Remember, if I'm from Virginia, I'm a Virginian. If I'm from Pennsylvania, I'm a Pennsylvanian. I'm a New Yorker first. Well, the election of 1796 was very interesting for this reason. This is before the 12th Amendment. The 12th Amendment changed national elections to the way we do them now. When we voted, Mrs. Tosh and I, last year, on the ballot, there was one box, Trump, Pence, right? And when you voted for Trump, you were voting for Pence as vice president. Before the 12th Amendment, they would all be on the ballot separately. And whoever got the most votes would be president, and whoever got second would be vice president. Well, look what happened. You had Adams as president, who barely defeated Jefferson. They're different. Adams is a Federalist, Jefferson's an Anti-Federalist. But they're vice president, they're president, vice president.
Second year students, this message is for the golf team. Golf practice for today has been canceled, but you are being encouraged to go to the Flying V and play 9 holes of golf or to a driving range on your own. So please make an effort to go ahead and practice today, but regular golf practice has been canceled. Thank you.
Let me get this straight. If it's not raining, you're on the golf team, you get to go to Flying V and just play golf for free.
Nope.
Is that true?
No. If the owner's there, he does not like to be nice. He makes you pay like full price, but all of his employees let us in for free. So it's a little bit of a mix.
Very interesting.
I once went without money because they always let me in.
Yeah.
And he was like, give him money.
Seriously.
Yeah. He was a jerk about it.
What a punk.
I put him in his place.
All right. You see what happened there? Kind of strange, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Imagine if you had Trump Harris. What a mix that would be.
That would be like, I think the country.
That would be great. That would be
I know, just
That would be good theater.
Yeah.
So, listen, this idea of partisanship that Washington detested, it's almost inevitable, right? And actually, as great as I think Washington was, And I'm not saying that the two-party system we have is perfect, by no means it's not, right? But one-party system is worse. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, maybe if we had 3 or 4, that'd be better, but one-party rule would be worse. Now you've really centralized the power, right? At least if Republicans and Democrats are fighting against each other, how about this? The more they fight against each other, maybe the less they get done. Think about it. The less the government gets done, is that a bad thing? You see what I'm saying? So it's not necessarily bad. I mean, we don't like it because we like peace, right? We like peace and harmony. We don't want all the division and fighting and rancor. But for free people, that friction, some friction, is necessary. Or those people in power, because of human nature, we are fallen, depraved people. They're going to try to get more power. Because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All pigs are equal. Some pigs are more equal than others. The Adams administration, well, real quick, here's the Adams administration in one line or two. So he's involved in this quasi, you ever heard that word before? Quasi-war, like, it's kind of like halfway. It's not like a Cold War that we experienced in America when I was your age between the Soviet Union and America, where they were constantly not fighting, but a battle of ideas, communism and freedom, and building up arms, but never really going to fight each other with those. That was a Cold War, like cold shoulder, like I don't like you. This was more like, hey, we're about to go to war with France. And it's called the XYZ affair. Again, you got to do everything fast. But this is one of the highlights or lowlights of Adams' administration is in the diplomatic relations going on to avoid war, we didn't want to release the names of the French diplomats who were kind of friendly towards Americans because that could mean problems for them, right? So instead of calling them by name, the Americans released them as W, X, Y, and Z. There was 4 of them. So why is it not called the WXYZ affair? I guess it doesn't have the same ring to it. XYZ affair. Why is it named that? Because they didn't want to give their real names. So they called this guy X, that guy Y, and the other guy Z to hide their identities. But anyway, the big deal was it averted us going to war with France. The U.S. Navy is established under the Adams administration. And another thing of note, Adams makes peace. This is in the late 1700s. There is a person in Europe, a French leader in Europe that is rising and trying to control all of Europe. Way before Hitler, there was a man named Napoleon Bonaparte. You see pictures of him? Usually standing there with his hand and maybe suffered from little man syndrome, and he was like 5 foot. Derek, you're much bigger than I was. Okay, how tall are you?
You have a little man syndrome.
Sure. He's looking at me like he's seething because I said little man syndrome. Do you know I was not 5 foot until freshman year? So I'm a sophomore. I was about 5'1", 5'2".
Derek's like 4'8".
I don't like this topic. I like 5 foot.
All right. He was just looking at me like,
I'm 6 foot.
why is he looking at me? Because you're looking at me.
Yeah.
All right. The Alien and Sedition Acts. They were passed to punish French-friendly Republicans. Remember, at this point, we're calling them Republicans. They're Democrat Republicans. They are anti-federalists. And those acts are going to be overturned shortly after this, a couple years later, because of their unconstitutionality, which we'll get to in a second. Because again, we're a country that has just been born. How's this going to work? We said yesterday, I think, that the third branch of government, the judicial branch, didn't even have a home. Oh, that's right. We have a Supreme Court. Let's see, where are we gonna put them? They're headquartered in the basement of the Capitol. We know them now as a pretty powerful branch of government. Right? I mean, Supreme Court is seemingly, there's a lot of people that fear that we're kind of living under a tyranny of the court. Like, they shouldn't be that powerful. But evidently at the beginning, they weren't even seen as co-equals branches of government to the executive and the legislative. Goes fast. Then we get to the election of 1800. If you thought the election of 1796 was strange, which it was, we've got another strange election coming up 4 years later. So see how history repeats itself. We think we're living in strange days when it comes to elections and stuff and such, and division, but there's nothing new under the sun. A wise man once said that. Solomon himself. Adams, during his administration, is when the capital moves to Washington. Actually, in the summer of 1800. Whoops. Again, the election is supposed to be John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. The Federalist, Adams, is running against the Democrat Republicans, Jefferson and Burr. Jefferson and Burr, remember this is before the 12th Amendment, when we changed it. Jefferson and Burr both get 73 electoral votes. It's a tie. What happens? Who was paying attention last year when before the election they were going through all these scenarios? We knew it was going to be a close election. What if it came out a tie? What if Trump Biden came out 269? Who remembers what was going to happen? Anybody? It would be sent to the House of Representatives. So there was some consternation among the Trump supporters, like, wait, if it's a tie and it goes to the House, who's in control of that place? So what was the chances of them voting Trump over Biden with her in charge, right? Well, the Federalists control the House. Are you informing him that Nancy Pelosi's the Speaker of the House?
Just making sure I knew.
He didn't know.
I don't think she would have gotten to decide. It was one vote for state.
Well, oh, that's true, yeah,
It was one vote
but
for
still.
state. It would have turned out Republican.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Wait, what?
If it goes to the House of Representatives, then even though there was more Democrats in the House, and Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi, it was determined that each state would, they were still fighting about it, that each state would get one vote.
That's what it says.
So even though there's more representatives in the House that are Democrat, there's more states that send Republicans. Does that make sense?
I feel that.
What's the largest state in the union? Population-wise, you're right,
Oh.
geographically. So California, if they send 54 representatives to the House, and 34 of them, or 38 of them are Democrat, then and New York sends more Democrats than Republicans, those two large populations are going to send more Democrats into the House of Representatives. However, those are only 2 states out of 50, right? All the other 48 states they also send representatives to the Congress. So even though there's more Democrats in Congress, there's more Republican states represented than Democrats in Congress. Does that make sense? Anyway, in this election, 1800, there's a tie, and it goes to the House, and they can't break the tie after the second vote, or the third vote, or the fourth vote, or the 34th vote. 35 times they try to vote before finally Jefferson wins.
Which guy changed the flag?
Yeah, I don't know. Or how many, maybe a couple changes here and there through that course. So the Federalists have now lost after being the dominant force from the time of Washington's presidency in 1789. They are losing control, have lost control of the executive and legislative branch of government. The anti-federalists are taking control. But before Adams leaves, he does this thing you may have heard last year called pack the court. He appoints a lot of federal judges. Remember, I think yesterday we told you there was 13 district courts and 3 appeals courts. And he packs the courts with his appointments. In other words, hey, I've lost the election. The Congress is also going to the Democrat Republicans. So one way that I'll ensure that the Federalist legacy lives on is by federal judges. And from that comes Chief Justice John Marshall, who becomes Supreme Court Justice in 1801 and serves there for 34 years. So even though there's going to be kind of a political revolution happening, one branch of the government is going to be under the quote-unquote control of a Federalist appointed Judge Marshall. Thank you for saying that. No, seriously. Everybody caught up? Oh, but wait, there's more. Yeah, interesting information here. Political rivals Jefferson and Madison. Wait. I mean say Adams. I'm really confused here. Become friends after retirement, and they both died on the same day. Well, look at the date.
Yeah.
50 years after the Declaration, they both died on the same day. So,
Yeah, the Madison kind of came out left field.
yeah.
They're gonna try to Adams instead of Madison.
We're just trying to figure out. Katie pulls up the cheap.
I guess I have to look.
This is what happened. This group of boys, we all split up, we're trying to find it all. So you go to sleep. Through the floor. So we were sprinting.
I'm so glad.
And so eventually we found an X. It wasn't actually exact, but then you have.
Don't touch my foot. That's disgusting.
All the corners.
Standing up to your
Hey.
Not sure if you just can just exit, right? And here's all the pages. You guys are finally here, find your way to the exit.
Okay, everybody get that change? I inadvertently wrote Madison there, I typed Madison. Jefferson and Adams, these political rivals, strangely died the same day, and I forget which one. One of them, whoever died first, had just gotten the news. I've seen a documentary on this, that the other one died. I want to say Jefferson died first. And then Adams found out about it right before he died.
I think I.
There was some quote that, I mean, I don't know if there was an actual disease, just natural causes. Yeah. Yeah,
Can I answer this, Trish?
sure. Why would that ring?
What?
Why would
Jake
that?
was snapping.
That leads us to what's called the Jeffersonian era in American history. They are the anti-federalists. The less government, the better. They're the ones fighting for less control by the central government. Because look, I think we talked about it yesterday. How is this going to work? You have to have some strength in your, well, the reason we have a constitution is because what was the document that was running the country before the Constitution that wasn't strong enough? The what? Well, no, the Declaration was the foundation for the country that the Constitution was built on. But what was the document that was ruling, that was the blueprint for the country right after the war? The Bill of Rights are an addendum, they're an amendment to the Constitution, so they're part of the Constitution. Right after the war, we were living under the blank of blank, Articles of Confederation. And the reason that they convened this constitutional convention happens because these articles weren't working. And the big problem with them was the federal government didn't have enough power. How are you going to take these 13 states that see themselves as sovereign and unite them together unless there's strength in that central government, right? So, okay, now we have a constitution. We think we've given the central government more power. Whoa, time out. We didn't mean that much power. That's what's going on. So the anti-federalists have now taken over. That makes sense?
Yeah.
We needed strength, and this is listen, we're 240 years later, we're still battling this, right? And that's okay. That kind of is like, again, that you need that friction, you need that happening. You need to have people saying, whoa, we got to have some strength in the central government, or else it's going to be chaos. And you need other people saying, whoa, time out. That's you're becoming way too powerful. And in the Bill of Rights, individual liberty. Here's the contention between the national government and the state and local governments. But while that's going on, there's got to be something in place to protect us as individuals, right? It's a beautiful thing, this America you live in, with all its flaws, with all the bad things. In comparison, relative to the world, we're not comparing America to heaven, people. We're comparing America to all the other countries in the world. It's the greatest country ever conceived. The Chief Justice Marshall, that's a repeat, on the court for 34 years. From 1801 to 1835. That is pretty influential. you know, that the way we choose judges, they tend to be older because we want people with experience, people with wisdom. Just like you can't be president till you're 35, but you can be a representative in Congress. You can be a senator when you're 30. We have these age restrictions because, you know, we don't want some young person, you know, I know you think you know it all, but you don't, right? So you want people that have had life experience and wisdom. So we usually have, you know, think about the justices on the court. You know, you don't see 20-year-olds on there. Yeah. Mhm. Now, this is a big deal here. Even as fast as we're going, this bit of information, so when you go to college in a couple of years, you start, maybe even next year, some of you, I don't know if you're doing it already, you're going to start taking CCP classes, right? This is going to come up over and over again because this is a landmark decision. The first really big decision made by our U.S. Supreme Court in 1801. Marbury versus Madison. The idea of judicial review. The court declared a law unconstitutional. The court didn't even have its own building. It was in the basement of the, right? Now the court has become much more significant, and they have said Congress can pass a law, okay, but if there's a suit brought against that law, we have the power to strike that law from the books and declare it unconstitutional. Does that make sense? It's more than just we're a bunch of judges and you come to us and we make a decision. This case laid the foundation for the Supreme Court has the authority to take a law duly passed by the House of Representatives and the Senate, the people's house, and the people the country elected, and we can say it's unconstitutional. That's pretty powerful. In other words, it could theoretically be this. 100% of your parents voted for people in the House that 100% voted for a law. 435 representatives and 100 senators, they had a law and they all voted yes. The Supreme Court, if someone takes it to court and gets to that point, could declare that law constitutional. It's pretty powerful stuff. Yeah.
You know what the law was?
It had to do with Madison's. I do and I don't. I haven't looked at it lately, but it had to do with an appointment to a position by this Marbury guy, and then after the election, he didn't get that appointment, even though he was promised that job. I don't have all the details. Does that make sense? Like one administration says that this is going to be your job. The next administration comes in and says, no. That was part of it. Anyway. The Barbary Pirates, remember them? Have you heard of them? Well, just like there are tech pirates today, in the last year, we've seen, in the last 6 months, we've seen these techno pirates put a halt to our pipeline. Remember that a few months ago? Where they hacked into the pipeline system and gas prices shot up temporarily really high because the gas supply was down. And then they hack into like a meat packing company or something a couple months after that. And what they do is they do this hacking, and then they get a hold of the company and they say, oh, you pay us a ransom and we'll unlock your system. Companies pay the ransom because you got to have your system unlocked, right? Well, what's going to happen if we keep paying the ransom? We're going to keep doing it, right? So pirates, that's kind of how they operate. Nobody really wants to go to war or to lose life. So, okay, well, Jefferson said, no more. We're not paying the ransom. And he sends in the U.S. Marines. And this is where we get the Marine hymn. You want to hear the Marine hymn?
Yeah.
Don't you just love hearing the Marine hymn? From the halls of Montezuma to the Tripoli. That's where this comes from.
I know this. You should put your pencil in.
For the US Marines. So
Oh, Caleb knows it.
there's one for the US Marines. All right, the Louisiana Purchase, certainly you heard of that. It's under the Jefferson administration that America doubles in size. You might not remember how that all came about. Napoleon, the French and the English are always going at it, right? Napoleon is at war with the British. He's trying to become king of Europe, and he needs money. He still has holdings in the New World. He sells that to Jefferson, to America. 15 mil. What would that be today, I wonder? Probably about, I think I did this calculation. At this time, it's probably a little more than every dollar, like a dollar back then would be like $100, or $100 today would be like a dollar back then. So put 2 zeros on the end of that. What do you got? 1.5 billion. Would that be a fair price for all of that territory? To double the size of America in today's dollars, would 1.5 billion be overpriced? No. So even in today's dollars, 15 million, which doesn't seem like a lot for all of that land today, even if you adjusted it to today, still wouldn't be overpriced. But Napoleon needed the money. Of course, you heard of Lewis and Clark. And what was that all about? They were trying to find a waterway to the Pacific. Is there a way to connect the Mississippi all the way to the Pacific Ocean? Well, they didn't find that, but they did great things, right? You've probably seen or read about Lewis and Clark and their expedition and all of the new vegetation that they discovered and animals. I think it was like 140 species that we didn't even know were on the continent. 140 maps. Maybe that was the 140 number. I think the species might be higher than that. So their work was very instrumental in paving the way for continued westward expansion, because what America is starting to figure out is we've got this destiny. It starts with an M. Manifest destiny. It's kind of obvious that we are supposed to occupy this continent from sea to shining sea. And the Louisiana Purchase goes a long way, and Lewis and Clark's expedition goes a long way in getting us there. Here's a big deal that we in Ohio, not just because we're in Ohio, but this Treaty of Greenville was a treaty after a major battle in Ohio called the Battle of Fallen Timbers between the settlers that were moving west, the Americans, and the natives. The victories won by the Americans in Ohio established American dominance in their battles with the Native Americans. And it leads to Ohio becoming the first state in an area called the Northwest Territory. We're the 17th state in the Union. What year? 1803. March 1st, 1803, Ohio becomes a state, the 17th state in the Union. First one in Northwest Territory. Hey, get this. $1.64 an acre. Let's multiply that by 100. 164 bucks an acre. Smile, I'm going to come out there and buy your property. 164 bucks an acre. How many acres you got?
91.
91. I think I'll do it. I think that's good price. So let's say let's round it off to 100. I'm paying 160. So I'm gonna get all of their property for what? 164,000, is that what that would be? That's a pretty good deal. $1.64. Whoa, we're behind second period. Here's the War of 1812 in one slide. It's crazy what we're doing here. But guess what? We could be doing none of this. We could have just said, forget about the beginnings of the country. We could have dove right in after the Civil War, but I just can't do it. Some back then called it Madison's War. What are we doing? We're actually going to poke the bear again. Caleb, do you realize what the odds were against the colonists defeating the British Army in the Revolution? You don't realize that? We talked about that many times. It would be like Columbiana beating Heartland this year in basketball. No, sight, not even close. It would be like East Palestine football beating. Well, you can pick anybody. That couldn't happen. You couldn't take this group of farmers and merchants and form them into this ragtag group of people and beat the most polished army in the world. Well, now we're doing it again. We expect to defeat them again, and this time it seems like we might be less prepared. Except we got old Ironsides, USS Constitution, against the British fleet. Amazing. And we got Oliver Hazard Perry out there, Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry out there leading the Battle of Lake Erie. We have met the enemy and they are ours.